Leo Finch, an architect who lived by the precise geometry of spreadsheets, smoothed the lapel of his tailored jacket for the 10th time, an unnecessary ritual of anxiety, was perched on a leather banquette at the Chroma Cafe, a place that smelled faintly of burnt espresso and pretension, waiting for a defining moment of his life. Today was the day he finally met Chloe, his long-distance girlfriend of 18 months, whose organized emails and scheduled video calls had been the bedrock of his stable existence. She was flying in from Geneva, and their reunion had been planned down to the minute. 1 p.m., quiet corner, and a perfectly laminated itinerary for the weekend. He glanced at his wrist, though his digital watch face was already on the table beside his untouched artisanal water. It was 1:02 p.m. Punctuality was a virtue, and Chloe, he knew, valued precision above all else. This minor delay was already causing a tremor in his carefully controlled internal system. He spotted a woman approaching the front window, tall, sleek, dressed in monochromatic tones, carrying a slim portfolio, and his heart gave a hopeful, pragmatic flutter. That must be her, he thought, the perfectly curated partner for his perfectly curated life, finally making the leap from digital abstraction to tangible reality. But then the door opened, and the woman who entered was the antithesis of monochrome perfection, shattering Leo's geometric equilibrium. She was a whirlwind named Eliza Hayes, though Leo didn't know her name yet. He only saw the shocking crimson of her vintage dress and the wild wind-tossed spirals of her dark hair. She was carrying a canvas bag overflowing with paintbrushes and what looked suspiciously like a half-eaten croissant, utterly lacking in Swiss efficiency. Eliza scanned the cafe with an expression of focused panic, looking less like a serious international consultant and more like a runaway art student late for a critique. Yet, as her gaze landed on Leo, sitting rigidly with his navy scarf precisely draped over the chair back, a flicker of relieved recognition crossed her face. This must be him, Eliza thought, checking the vague, blurry profile picture her blind date. Leo had sent dark hair, nice coat, and a blue scarf. Her Leo was supposed to be a recovering investment banker turned abstract sculptor, which somewhat explained the expensive scarf, if not the severe expression. Gathering her courage and her croissant crumbs, Eliza strode over to Leo's table. Her entrance, a cheerful yet clumsy collision of worlds. "Leo?" she asked, her voice a low, musical surprise, extending a hand that was smudged with dried turquoise paint. I'm Eliza. Sorry. Traffic was an absolute nightmare. Almost rear-ended a food truck. Leo blinked, his mind struggling to reconcile the name Chloe with this vibrant, messy presence, who clearly knew his name. He quickly processed the visual data. She was breathtakingly beautiful, possessing a spontaneous energy that was deeply alluring, despite being 17 minutes late by his Swiss standards. Maybe this is her idea of a surprise, he rationalized, a spontaneous burst of fun before they settled into their routine. A controlled experiment in chaos, Lisa, he managed, taking her hand and trying not to notice the paint. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Sit. Eliza settled opposite him, dumping her oversized canvas bag on the floor where it immediately disgorged a handful of vibrant colored pencils and a crumpled napkin. Oh, sorry. Standard operating procedure for me, she chuckled, attempting to sweep the mess back into the bag with her foot. So this is the face behind the minimalist profile. Leo smiled. A genuine, slightly nervous smile that Chloe's presence had never quite managed to extract. And this is the woman who communicates primarily in emojis and cryptic haikus. Eliza frowned slightly. Haikus? I thought your profile said you preferred long-form essays on existential dread. The wires were officially crossed. Right, Leo continued, deciding to lean into the spontaneous bit. I meant my personal style of communication is quite organized. Like a perfectly balanced cantilever bridge. A bridge, Eliza repeated slowly, tracing a pattern on the polished wooden table. I prefer things that are unconstrained. Like a splash of paint that defies gravity. Fascinating, Leo said, pulling out a chair for her with formal precision. Chloe said you had a great appreciation for structure, Chloe. Eliza raised an eyebrow. Is that the name of your studio assistant? I thought you worked alone, or maybe you meant your inner Chloe, the part of you that craves order. Leo hesitated. This was getting complicated, but her eyes held a spark of intelligence he found impossible to resist. Exactly, my inner Chloe. She keeps me sane. The waiter arrived, and Leo, reverting to his plan, ordered 2 black coffees, but Eliza immediately countered. "Oh, can I have a double-shot matcha latte with oat milk and a sprinkle of turmeric?" "I need the contrast," she said brightly. Leo stared at her order, which sounded less like a beverage and more like a philosophical experiment in liquid form. Contrast. Of course, the conversation that followed was a masterclass in unintentional miscommunication, a comic dance between 2 people talking about 2 different lives. "So, the new project," Leo began, referring to a massive municipal park redesign he was pitching. "It's all about maximizing efficiency within a confined public space." "Efficiency is the enemy of truth," Lisa countered passionately, believing he was talking about his sculpting. "You can't confine the soul of the work. It needs room to breathe. It needs proper drainage," mostly Leo corrected, utterly confused but charmed by her intensity. "And a budget that doesn't balloon into existential crisis. But the crisis is the art, Leo." "Yeah, the beautiful, terrifying realization that nothing truly aligns," Elisa exclaimed, leaning forward, her eyes shining. Leo found himself nodding, captivated. Chloe, the real Chloe, would have agreed with the budget and the drainage. "This Eliza was a firecracker, and your work?" Leo asked, genuinely curious about the chaotic beauty he assumed was her architectural vision. "What's your current focus?" "I'm working on a piece called Shattered Expectations," Eliza confided, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "It's a 12-foot canvas where I use only pigments derived from discarded household trash." Leo choked on his water. "Trash? For a public park? That's certainly avant-garde. The zoning committee will definitely have notes." Eliza laughed, a genuine, bright sound that made the entire pretentious cafe feel warmer. "Zoning. Oh, bless your practical heart. It's for the City Gallery's controversial new wing." The true magnitude of the misunderstanding began to settle on Leo, a cold, dread-filled realization that washed over him like a rogue tidal wave. He checked his phone under the table. No text from Chloe. He must simply be mistaken about this woman's identity. But he liked the mistake. He liked it too much. He spent the next 15 minutes debating whether to come clean or let this glorious accidental date continue until the inevitable dramatic crash. He chose the crash, hoping the thrill of the momentary deception might somehow be worth the ensuing paperwork. Eliza, meanwhile, was starting to think her sculptor date had an extremely dry sense of humor and a worrying obsession with building codes. "You know," Eliza mused, stirring her luminous green latte, "I thought a recovering investment banker would be a little more, well, bohemian." "I was never an investment banker," Leo confessed, the first crack in his facade. "I'm an architect. I build things that don't fall down." Just as Eliza was about to respond, 2 things happened simultaneously that guaranteed maximum awkwardness. First, Leo's phone buzzed with a sharp, concise text message. "Where are you?" "Waiting at the main entrance." "You are 19 minutes late." Chloe. Second, a nervous, slightly disheveled man in a wrinkled tweed jacket and a bright orange scarf approached their table. "Eliza," the tweed man asked, his voice squeaky with relief.
"I'm Leo."
"Your sculptor date." "I'm so sorry, I got lost arguing with a pigeon." The world stopped. Leo Finch looked at the new Leo. Eliza looked at the 2 Leos. The Chroma Cafe instantly became the center of a romantic comedy supernova. Eliza's face went the color of her crimson dress. "Wait. You're Leo, and you're not a sculptor." She pointed to Leo Finch. Leo Finch stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped backward with a violent, cringe-inducing screech. "I'm Leo Finch, I'm an architect. I was waiting for Chloe, the real Chloe." Hearing the screech and seeing the commotion, marched over from the main entrance, her posture radiating Geneva-level disapproval. Chloe took one look at the chaotic tableau to Leo's, a woman with paint-smudged hands and a mess of colored pencils, and her carefully organized world dissolved. "Elias?" Chloe's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "Who is this woman, and who is that?" She pointed to the nervous sculptor. Leo tried to speak, but the words, like his life plan, had collapsed into dust. "Chloe, this is a colossal, beautiful mistake." The sculptor Leo, sensing the imminent explosion of relationship drama, wisely backed away. Muttering, "I think I'll go argue with that pigeon again." Eliza, completely mortified, grabbed her canvas bag, which promptly dumped the half-eaten croissant onto the floor, adding a final, embarrassing flourish to the scene. "I am so sorry, Leo Finch," Eliza whispered, her eyes wide with genuine distress. "I mistook your scarf. I have to go." She didn't wait for a response, pushing past a furious Chloe and fleeing the cafe, leaving behind a trail of art supplies and a stunned architect. Chloe turned to Leo, her voice dangerously calm. "A beautiful mistake, Elias. This entire situation is a structural failure." Leo looked at Chloe, the woman he thought he wanted, the woman who represented stability and saw only disappointment and judgment in her eyes. He saw the future he had planned, predictable, safe, and utterly devoid of the spontaneous joy Eliza had provided in 20 minutes. "You're right, Chloe," Leo said, finally finding his footing. "It is a structural failure, not because of Eliza, but because I built the wrong foundation." Chloe, stunned by his sudden shift in tone, started to argue, but Leo simply shook his head, his decision already made. "I'm sorry, but I can't be the man who lives by your itinerary anymore. I just had the most interesting conversation of my life with a woman who uses trash for paint," he said, turning away. He walked past Chloe, who stood frozen in righteous indignation, and burst out of the Chroma Cafe, looking for a splash of crimson in the relentless urban gray. Eliza couldn't have gone far. She was clearly disoriented and probably still mortified by the croissant incident. He spotted her 4 blocks away, leaning against a graffiti-covered wall, hunched over, trying to zip up her overloaded bag. He ran, abandoning his architect's composure, his tailored jacket flapping wildly, man finally allowing chaos into his life. "Eliza, wait," he called out, his voice hoarse from the sprint. She looked up, her face tear-streaked, half from embarrassment and half from the painful realization that her blind date hadn't even shown up. "Leo, please, just let me dissolve into the asphalt," she pleaded, wiping her eyes with the back of a turquoise-smeared hand. Leo stopped, catching his breath. He didn't offer a platitude or an apology. He offered a genuine connection. "Never told you the real truth about my latest project," he admitted, leaning against the wall beside her. Lisa looked at him, curious despite herself. "The park drainage system?" "No," Leo smiled softly. "The real project is redesigning my life. For 18 months I used the wrong blueprint." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean, crisp business card, his own. "Leo Finch, architect. Is no longer waiting for Chloe, and definitely not a sculptor." Eliza let out a shaky laugh, the tension easing slightly. "Eliza Hayes, artist. Currently specializing in trash-derived pigment, definitely not an international consultant." "Good," Leo said, taking a step closer, leaving behind the ghost of the misunderstanding. "Now that the structural deficiencies have been identified, can we start over?" "Start what, exactly?" Lisa challenged, a cautious spark returning to her eyes. "A real meet-cute," he declared. "The one where I introduce myself to the most vibrant, fascinating woman I've ever met, who also happens to have terrible luck with online dating." He paused, holding her gaze. No longer the rigid architect, but a man embracing the unpredictable geometry of the heart. "You were meant for the sculptor, Eliza, and I was meant for the consultant," he said quietly. "But the universe made a beautiful error, forcing us together. The alchemy of awkwardness," Eliza murmured, finally smiling a full, dazzling smile that banished the last of the cafe's judgment. "The best kind of alchemy," Leo agreed. "Now, I want to take you to a place with terrible coffee, great drainage, and no risk of running into a long-distance punctual ex." He extended his hand again, not formally but gently, offering a second chance built on honest chaos, not planned perfection. Eliza took his hand. This time the paint smudge didn't matter. The connection was undeniable. The accidental date had been a comedy of errors, but the chase had turned into the true, earnest beginning of their story. They walked away from the wall, leaving the pristine chaos of the Chroma Cafe behind, ready to build something wonderfully messy together. The greatest loves often begin not with a perfect plan, but with a terrible, embarrassing mistake that forces two people to see the truth. This story of Leo and Eliza proves that sometimes the most rigid structures need to be broken by a splash of color to find their true form. Remember, your own life script might include cringeworthy moments, but those are the very chapters that lead to the best romances. If you enjoyed this story, please show your appreciation. Hit that like button, Share this story of mistaken identity with a friend, and make sure you subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more romantic comedy dramas.